Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling a really heavy but super important topic, religious freedom. It's something that gets violated for literally millions of people. We're going to dig into some pretty eye-opening data from groups like the Lausanne Movement and Open Doors, really get a sense of the scale of religious persecution. And that's going to lead us to some tough questions, about how we're supposed to confront injustice like this. All right, so let's just start at the beginning. We hear this phrase, religious freedom, all the time, right? But what does it actually mean? I think for a lot of us, it's just a given. We don't even think about it. But for millions of people, it's a fight every single day. So getting a handle on what it really means, that's step one to understanding what's really at stake here.
Okay, so on the world stage, the United Nations has a really clear standard for this. You can see it right here in Article 18. It's basically saying that religious freedom isn't just about, what you think quietly to yourself. It's the right to actually live your beliefs, to practice them, to change them if you want, and to do it alone or with other people. It's a big deal. It's defined as a fundamental human right for every single person. So you can kind of think about this from two different angles. First, there's the legal side. It's a right, something you can point to in a document and say, this is mine. But there's also this deeper theological view, and that frames it more as a moral duty. You know the golden rule, right? Do unto others, well, this is it in practice. It's about giving other people the same freedom you want for yourself. So it's not just a right you claim, it's also a responsibility you have. Okay, so that's the ideal. That's the promise. But now, let's look at the reality on the ground. And honestly, the data is pretty rough. It paints a really disturbing picture of how often this right just isn't a reality for people. Okay, just look at this number, 16.2 million. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. According to Open Doors, that's how many Christians have been displaced, forced from their homes, just in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, our source material here is focusing on this group, but let's be clear, this horrific experience of being violently uprooted, it's a story that's tragically familiar for so many different faiths. You think of the Rohingya in Myanmar or the Yazidis in Iraq. It's a global issue. And then there's this, 4,476. And you have to remember, that's not just a number on a screen, that's thousands of real people, thousands of families just completely shattered. In just the last reporting period, that's how many Christians were killed specifically because of their faith. And again, this kind of violence is just one piece of a much larger, heartbreaking global picture. It affects countless groups, the Uyghurs in China, the Baha'is in Iran. This is something that crosses all religious lines. And this is not a new thing, not at all. For decades, groups have been tracking the absolute worst places to be a religious minority. Take a look at this list. This is from the Open Doors World Watch List all the way back in 2004. See those names? North Korea, Saudi Arabia, Iran, China. Sound familiar? A lot of these same countries are still major hotspots for persecution today. It just shows you how deep-rooted and persistent this pattern of oppression really is. So why is this happening? What's behind all of it? Well, the sources say it's not just one thing. It's a whole mix of stuff. Sometimes it's religious fundamentalism, an extreme belief that can't tolerate anyone who's different. Other times it's this aggressive nationalism, where being a true citizen means belonging to one specific religion. It can even be about money and resentment, where minorities get blamed for economic problems. Or it could be a state ideology, like communism, that just sees religion as a threat to its control. The bottom line is, the pressure is coming from all different directions. Numbers are one thing, but to really get it, we need to see how this stuff actually affects people's lives day to day. So let's zoom in on two case studies. They show really different ways oppression can work, but both are just as devastating. First up, let's look at Vietnam. What the sources show here is this huge disconnect between what the government says about religious freedom and what's actually happening to people on the ground, especially for folks in so-called illegal house churches. So in Vietnam, the persecution is kind of sneaky. It hides behind bureaucracy. Instead of arresting someone for, say, being a Christian, the authorities will use these vague charges like disturbing public order. It's a pretext, right? They use it to raid private worship meetings, to destroy homes and property, and to hold these awful seminars that are basically designed to psychologically break people down until they renounce their faith. And for certain ethnic minorities, like the Montagnards and the Hmong, it's even worse. And check this out, this is a really common tactic. The Vietnamese government can literally point to its own laws and say, see, we have religious freedom. But at the same time, they're running this brutal campaign of repression behind the scenes, especially in rural areas where they think nobody is watching. Okay, now let's do a complete 180 and look at Saudi Arabia. Because here, the restrictions aren't hidden at all. They're not making up excuses. They are written right into the law, plain as day. It's simple, really. In Saudi Arabia, the state enforces one specific version of Islam, period. By law, every citizen has to be a Muslim. There are no churches, no synagogues, no temples. You can't publicly practice any other faith. It's forbidden. And even though they say foreigners can worship in private, the reality is that many get arrested, tortured, and even deported just for praying together in their own homes. It's a system where being different religiously is literally a crime. So when you see all this subtle oppression, this overt oppression, it leads to a really tough question. If this is happening to you, how are you supposed to respond? What do you do? And this is where our source material gets into some really deep theological territory. There's this biblical scholar, Walter Wink, and he came up with a fascinating term, the myth of redemptive violence. It's this idea that deep down, most of our cultures are built on one core belief, that violence saves us, that when evil shows up, the only way to beat it is with bigger, stronger violence. It's like our default setting. It's a story we automatically go to. And you see this story everywhere, right? Think about it. From ancient myths to basically every action movie ever, like Gladiator or The Patriot. The plot is always the same. A good guy gets wronged by a bad guy. The good guy gets strong, and then he comes back for revenge in this huge, bloody fight. He wins. But the victory never really lasts, does it? Evil always finds a way to come back, and the whole cycle just starts over again. But then you look at the New Testament, and it proposes something completely different. It's a radical departure from that myth. It looks right at that belief that violence is the answer and says, nope. Instead of fighting fire with fire, the instruction is to, and I'm quoting here, overcome evil with good. And that's not just some nice, fluffy saying, it's a total reboot of your entire strategy, your entire mindset. And the teachings on this are, well, they're intense, and they're not ambiguous at all. Love your enemies. Do good to people who hate you. Pray for the people who are persecuting you. The whole point isn't just to sit there and take it, it's to actively break the cycle of revenge. It's about responding in a way that is so unexpected that it shatters the whole system. You refuse to become what you hate. Yeah, and it's really important to get this straight. This is not about being passive. It's not about letting evil win. The sources are very clear. They call it nonviolent resistance. It's a powerful, active choice. It's about finding brave, creative, defiant ways to fight back without becoming violent yourself. And the goal is amazing when you think about it. It's to free everyone, the victim and the victimizer, from the trap of that evil system. But if you look at history, there was this massive shift. For the first few hundred years, the early Christians were overwhelmingly pacifist. They wouldn't even serve in the army. But then, in 313, the Roman Emperor Constantine makes Christianity legal. And almost overnight, everything flips. The church goes from being this persecuted minority to being the official religion of the most powerful empire in the world. And now they have an empire to defend. So by the 400s, you have guys like St. Augustine coming up with just war theory, which is basically a theological framework that says, yes, it's okay for Christians to fight and kill to defend the state. And that huge historical pivot leaves us with this massive, unanswered question that people of faith are still wrestling with today. When you're facing persecution, what do? Do you follow the path of nonviolent resistance like the very first Christians did? Or do you have a right, maybe even a moral duty, to defend yourself, your family, your community, with force if you have to? It's a really tough tension, and it gets right to the heart of what it means to live a faithful life in a world that can be incredibly violent. And it's a question we all have to think about when we see injustice, wherever it is.